Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Aydin Paladin, who is a longtime YouTuber who concentrates on data-driven, long-form critiques of current issues. Her videos are wonderful. She's got a depth and breadth of knowledge that I find exhilarating, and in this conversation we speak about, I guess, current kind of culture war-ish stuff, as well as diving deeper into her version of monarchism, which she prefers over democracy. And I press her a bit to see if my own liberal values can comprehend monarchy as something other than tyranny. Again, she's an exhilarating person, and you can find her streaming constantly online via the links below, as well as her videos. If you enjoy this content, consider liking, subscribing, and donating if you feel so moved via the tip jars below. Without further ado, here is Aydin Paladin. There was this phenomena called breadtube that I think it's worn out its welcome, but there's still pretty big names out there. I'm wondering where you're seeing political energy in, I guess in the YouTube kind of Twitter sphere, but like in the sphere that you've been involved in.
Something is amiss, I think. The breadtubers, yeah, I mean, Vosh was a breadtuber, or is a breadtuber, I guess. So you could put Hassan in that category as well.
Hassan and ContraPoints.
ContraPoints. Yeah, I guess ContraPoints made a video about it even, so I suppose so, about breadtube. We know for a fact, this is incontrovertible, that a lot of these people were being paid for by the UK government, specifically, to make, specifically for vaccine stuff. But they were getting paid by the UK government. We know now also, via ChudLogic has done some reporting on this, that a lot of these breadtubers were also being paid by Brianna Wu's PAC to talk about socialist ideas. So these people aren't, they are not just, they don't just exist in isolate. They are getting outside funding that maybe now I'm sure that Ben Shapiro and these other like really big conservative groups probably are also getting PAC money, right? Yeah. But it does seem to be a little bit disingenuous, particularly when it's not being disclosed, because you are supposed to disclose that kind of stuff.
Well, I don't think it's just about them being funded, but also their ideological enemies being either deboosted or deplatformed, especially in the 2020 era.
Yes. Well, because it will, particularly after Jan 6 and before that, regarding everything surrounding COVID, if you had anything that approached a dissenting opinion on COVID, then for any reason, even if you were a scientist, like, who was that one guy who got banned from Twitter, actual doctor?
Malone? Was it?
Yeah, Dr. Malone, that was it, yeah. Where just had to basically come back after the fact and say, yeah, he was actually right about all that, but it wasn't good for the messaging, so we just got rid of him. Or all of the Twitter files that have come out that showed that Twitter was actively acting again to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story, to suppress conservative voices. Yeah, up until, in that way, with Twitter at least, sure, Elon buying it has made a positive shift towards people with more conservative or dissident beliefs being able to say what they think. But and I do think breadtube is falling apart such as it is only because they always eat their own eventually. With Vosh, right? Vosh is one of his big defenders on the creep stuff is Keffels, who raised $100,000 to sue the Canadian government. Well, to go to the Civil Rights Tribunal, which doesn't cost any money to file, by the way. And no evidence of any filing. A year and a half later, just ran off with that money. Where did that go? I mean, besides into a Coke fund, but sure. If they're not eating each other, then they're making really bad tactical decisions, because I think a lot of these people are used to not being questioned and being on top because the algorithms were promoting them, because their ideology was being promoted by the people who run these different websites, because they agree with them. They're also socialists in that they're champagne socialists.
I like the just the image of like the power fist,
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, I'm fighting against the power, but every single regime tendril. What's the arms of an octopus? Is it a tendril?
It's arms, tentacles.
Yeah, tentacles. Yeah, every single tentacle of the regime is like supporting you. It's like,
Right.
actually, no, you're being fisted. You're just the fist that the regime is
Right.
using on everybody else.
Oh, speaking of things changing, there's been talk lately of the idea of putting the woke away because it seems to be very unprofitable, right? So
Yeah. Do you think that that's a fantasy or?
I don't know. A friend of mine did a stream about it the other day that I listened to and seemed to have some pretty good evidence that they are trying to walk it back, but don't get your hopes up on it. It's not that they're just going to put it away. They're just going to find other ways to enforce it or manipulate people just because their particular ostentatiousness and excessive forcing of people to do the stuff. They were boiling the frog too fast, I think is the answer. For example, speaking about the fist, every year for years and years now, when it's Pride Month, when it's June, every one of these mega corporations goes and makes their Twitter profile pride flag.
Except unless their Twitter profile happens to
China.
Be in, China or Afghanistan or something like that.
Right. But they'll make their Western profiles all pride flags. They didn't do that as much this year, or this last June. And it was noticeable that a lot, and people were asking about it on Twitter, like, why didn't you change your profile pic? Don't you stand? And the same thing with Black History Month. I didn't see almost any of that from corporations this year.
Yeah.
Where was all that? Where was all the BLM stuff? BLM is, I'd say, nearly dead in terms of
it's not useful.
No, it's not. Well, because it's largely based on lies, demonstrable lies. And I think everyone knows it at this point. I mean, it was crazy that I think even after Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted, there were still people going out on the news saying he shot and killed 3 black men or 3 black people. Like, it's just complete and utter lack of understanding of these things because it's about shibboleths. It's not about truth.
Is it also about demoralization? Because putting the woke away, like at this point in time, and it's partially on me because I've been studying and dealing with this woke stuff, you know, and we both know what woke is, and I believe my audience. Every once in a while, there's one random commenter like, what is woke, you know, but I think we kind of have established that. But like, I see everything in terms of skin color. I see everything in terms of sexism. I see everything in the media as an engineering project to equitize discourse in one way or another. So I'm very skeptical, and it bars me from enjoying a good story at this point because I have to do that calculation.
Oh, sure. I mean, well, what it is it's and they don't like this phrase either, but it is accurate. It's cultural Marxism, which is that it derives from trying to equalize perceived inequalities between. Now, Marxism is about equalizing differences between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Cultural Marxism then is about trying to equalize the distance between the oppressed and the oppressors, who has more cultural power. So that's about, well, what does that mean? We need more representation of Black queer women in television. And that part's falling apart too. Hollywood has been in flames for a couple of years now, I'd say. And the last year's box office was absolutely abysmal. Like almost every single movie, but besides, there were a couple that didn't flop, but Barbie and Oppenheimer did well. But Barbie did well, even though it had woke messaging, if you want to say that, but here's why its woke messaging worked, in my opinion. Because the woke messaging was, it's a movie aimed at women, and the message was, nothing is ever your fault, ever. Oh, so of course women loved it. Like, duh, of course it made millions and millions and billions of dollars. Because it's telling people what they want to hear, even if it's not a good message, even if it's a progressive message. It's one that is pleasant to half of the population. So, and then there's, you know, Margot Robbie is beautiful, and what's his name?
Gosling.
Ryan Gosling is fun, so men can go watch it too, can be dragged along with their
Yeah,
girlfriends or
yeah.
wives to watch it. So
Can you? There's this guy who is just getting really popular right now on Twitter, and I think he derives from TikTok, but he's also on YouTube. It's called Math. He does these really pretty diagrams, and he goes through the TikToks of the girls like blaming everything on men, not finding them attractive anymore. And he's got like all the different diagrams of what women want, what men want, and he goes through it. It's pretty entertaining and stuff. But
I'll check that out.
The narrative, it's not your fault. The fault with that narrative is that what's your responsibility then? And I'm trying to imagine a movie that would be well received by males, or people who enjoy male-centered stories, where there's no responsibility. Like, it's not your fault.
No.
It's not responsibility. There's no story there.
No, I mean, what the other movie that did well, Top Gun Maverick, right?
Yeah.
Men went out to go see that. That's all about responsibility.
Yeah.
The movies that men seem to gravitate towards are ones that place men in roles of responsibility as a hero, right? Of the hero's journey. The movies that women like, generally speaking, are ones where they're they don't have responsibility, and they can put themselves. And there's been research on this, which is the kind of movies that women like are ones where they can insert themselves into a pretty much blank slate protagonist. They want to be the woman in the story. Men want to be like the man in the story. Men want to be like Batman. They don't want to be in that story acting as Batman, right? Women, whereas they just want to. That's like the Twilight films are probably the best example, because Kirsten Stewart's character is a tabula rasa. She is so blank, personalityless, that any woman can insert herself into that position. Nothing changes about the story. Because she doesn't have any personality. So
it's
it could
like a
be
narrative
anyone.
Matryoshka doll. You just kind of you just fit yourself in there.
Put yourself right in, because there's nothing there. Whereas again, men are aspiring to. That's why men say, I want to be like Superman. I want to be like Batman. I want to be like Captain America. I don't necessarily want to be him or insert myself into the role in the film like that.
Yeah.
But feminists would call that like a power fantasy or something. I think that's more about responsibility, though, that men enjoy that power fantasy of.
Well, I mean, there's tension there. There's tension, and then there's action, and then there's development too. Like there's character development in the grind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Steel Magnolias? I don't know why we're talking about this, but so it's got Sally Field in it, Julia Roberts, really young, Shirley MacLaine, Dolly Parton, Daryl Hannah.
I've heard of it, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
Well, my wife, it's one of her favorite movies, and we sat down as a family to watch it, and it was just so difficult for me to listen to it because there was so much chattering, and they were just gossiping about each other. I had to go to the other side of the room and kind of tune it out because it was just so. There was just so much dialogue and verbiage, and it was just this swirly, swarmy, kind of overly communicative thing. It was really interesting to see the movies that I like, and she can get along and suffer through the movies that I like, but the movies she likes, it scrambles my brain. It's really difficult for me to like inhabit that space. It's really busy. It was just an interesting.
Because women tend to be more socially oriented. And men tend to be more action oriented or object oriented. Yeah. That's just a fact. Differences between men and women, and that's fine. But that would be why, a movie about which I've never seen it. Like I said, I've heard of it, but I don't think if I saw it, I was very young.
It's very ensemble-y.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I like girly stuff in terms of like what? Film and television. Oh, I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I hardly think it's. Because it's fun. It's just because it's a legitimately fun and funny show. And I do like the character drama in it too. There's, is Buffy going to hook up with Spike or with Angel? Okay, there's some aspect of that's the girlier part of it. And Buffy's a very girly girl, but for the most part, it's just a weird fantasy. I'd say it's like cheesy, just a little show. So it's really fun, but that always gets considered a girl show. I know lots of guys who really love Buffy, but I was actually just talking recently about like my favorite girl movies, and I said like, well, number one is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But it's another one where I think anyone can enjoy that because it's got amazing cinematography, not just cinematography, but the way that it's edited. It's very fascinating. It is a love story. Maybe it's an anti-love story, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then after that, I said, 500 Days of Summer, which is also an anti-love story. That's with Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and which was one of his earlier roles. But it's also like an anti-love story. And then the last one I said was The Fountain, which is just Hugh Jackman, which I love. But that's also just a depressing movie where Hugh Jackman's wife dies of cancer. I mean, that's like, wow, fantastic. But I would call those more, I think anyone could enjoy any of those films, men or women, or anywhere in between, I guess. But they are very emotionally laden in many ways, in a way that like a superhero action flick or a Top Gun, but isn't as just hitting you with hard emotional stuff that's intended to make you cry, essentially.
Yeah.
But that's how I'd call a girl movie, even if it's not for women.
This might be a curveball, but I'm interested. So every once in a while you see these demographic breakdowns of how America would vote if it was just this group, that group, this group, that group. And you can kind of see that the Democratic Party is fueled by minorities and then college-educated women.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering your thoughts on a Longhouse type. And by Longhouse, like kind of basically a matriarchal, very level, bureaucratic, kind of gossipy. Everybody's controlled by the means of like social cohesion is the highest goal, rather than excellence or exploration or something like that. I'm wondering like what you think about the messaging, how that works, and then like the kind of society that it builds when that kind of mindset, that Longhouse, that the cat lady, highly mobile, Hillary Clintonite, feminist, NIMBY, yet very virtue signaling about the minorities, and I'm wondering if that is, to what degree do you assign the cause of a lot of different problems in America, like the border crisis or just kind of the sluggishness of our economy, to that kind of mindset, or if that mindset is just the outcropping of something else? Like
I've said for a while that I think that leftist ideology, broadly speaking, left-leaning ideology, is inherently feminine because it is group-oriented, whereas more conservative ideologies, for the most part, are more, not inherently all the time, but more inherently masculine, in that particularly libertarian ideology and republicanism, true republicanism, are about individual rights. It's, as Kunat Lenin calls the title of his book, it's liberty or equality. You have one side that is about equality, really equity at this point, but equality in terms of what they perceive equality to be, which ends up being equity. It's that everyone is equal in one way or another, and we have to try and make things more equal all of the time, versus liberty, which is rights, which is different from freedom. Freedom is anarchy. Actual freedom is just anarchy. That is the natural state of animals.
Okay.
Liberty is rights under a system wherein, such as, for example, you can't just go kill somebody because they piss you off, right? So there's positive and negative liberties, things that you can't do because they harm others, and things that you can do. So I think that that's the fundamental difference, is that it is a feminine ideology or feminine leaning ideology about wanting to care for others or be seen as caring for others, which is actually kind of important because of the social nature. It means also inherently that you don't just want to care for others, you want everyone to know how much you care for others so that you can gain social capital by being seen as a good person who is living up to this equality-based system.
Yeah. But the contradiction of that, having social capital, means that you're more important than somebody else, and so somebody else is going to take you down because you're not equal anymore.
Well, of course, but that's why it's inherently contradictory, because the purpose of it is not really about being equal. It's about looking like you want everything to be equal. Because again, someone like Hassan, for example, a millionaire espousing socialist ideology, but Does he give away all of his money to make everybody more equal? No, of course not. It's not about actually being equal. It's about the giving off the illusion that you care about liberty, or that you care about equality, so that you gain social capital. And this game is old as hell at this point.
Okay.
And I find it quite tiresome. But if you would like to, if anyone wants to do some more reading on it, the quintessential book on it is Eric von Kuhnert-Leiden's book, Liberty or Equality, The Challenge of Our Times. Okay. That's really what I would recommend.
So I'm just as tired of you of the equity stuff and looking at the equity, but I still struggle to get my grip on this liberty part. Could you help me enshrine that fabulous value?
So liberties, there's two types again. There's positive liberty. These are the things that you can do. And then there's negative liberties. These are the things that you can't do because they infringe upon someone else's liberties. So that's pretty much it. Is that it's allowing maximal liberty under a system that doesn't infringe on others' rights, and that allows everyone to, in terms of the positive liberties, maximize your own freedom so long as it does not infringe on others' rights and doesn't cause any kind of upset to the society. In terms of that's the problem with freedom, because freedom operates under no rules. Liberty operates under the rules of law. So that's, laws are either allowing things to happen, those are positive liberties, you're allowed to do these things, and then negative liberties, these are the things you're not allowed to do because they're violative. So I think that helps. So
there's a system, though. Mm-hmm. So what is the system in your mind best founded on, the system of law? Like when you look at that?
Personally, it's monarchy, but you can have it under any system of governance.
Okay. Can you describe monarchy for?
Well, Kuhnert-Leiden argues for liberty or equality from a monarchical system, because his argument is that the problem with democratic systems, be they Republican or not, is that people will ultimately vote in a block. They won't vote based on it, because the average person doesn't know anything about politics. They might have a little niche personal issue that really bothers them, but generally they vote for whatever their group tells them to vote for. And they will make very bad decisions because of this, because they're not paying attention to politics all the time. It's impossible to. It's too much cognitive load. You can't, unless it is your job to be a professional political commentator or analyst, it's just absolutely impossible to understand all aspects. And even then, let's say you actually are a political analyst. Maybe you only pay attention to national politics, and you might not know much about international politics.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for one person to ever have a full, complete understanding of it. There's just too much cognitive load in it.
Yeah.
And when you ask someone to make a vote for a politician or for some ordinance or whatever, you're asking them to understand absolutely every aspect of it. When people go to the ballot box, instead what they do is base their thinking on nothing more than group ideology, or excuse me, group identification, because that's the most salient to most people. What do I identify as? What is my group psychology? Mm-hmm. So in America, it's Democrat or Republican. Which one? And that's usually, what is my family? Are we Democrats or Republicans? What are my friends? Are we Democrats or Republicans? And that's where people basically stop thinking, because it's just too much load to think about it more complexly than that for the vast majority of people who, again, have lives, they have got families, they've got jobs to deal with, and they can't think about all these things down the line. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what leads to that. It's just group psychology.
Within the person that you're saying is arguing for liberty versus equality in an anarchist system?
Kuhnert-Leiden is arguing that Hoppe argues more from an anarcho-capitalist point of view, yes. But the person I'm talking about, Kuhnert-Leiden, his contention is that monarchy is preferable because it removes voting. You have instead a monarch who is raised from birth to have pretty much one job, which is statecraft. So now, it's already someone typing, hearing this. Well, what if the monarch's insane? What if the king is crazy? Yes, that could happen. I present to you an opposite or counterfactual. Yes, throughout history there have been crazy monarchs. Yes. However, Joe Biden, democratically elected,
81 million votes, the most votes in history.
and he's a senile old kook who likes to sniff kids. So just saying that because someone is democratically elected does not also make them potentially crazy.
Democratically elected.
Right. Yes, yeah. Sure. Just because someone is democratically elected doesn't make them a good ruler either. The difference is politicians decide to become politicians. Now, there is an element that they are also groomed because they come from these political families where you're going to go to these elite universities. You're going to go join these skull and bones private groups, and they're going to make it so that when you do eventually run, you're going to have a very easy time because you've got all these friends in high places. So there is an element of that, but they're not trained in statecraft. The reason that's different too is that Joe Biden leaves office. Let's say he's legit, been the most corrupt president of all time. Now, a graph came out recently, or a chart that said that President Trump was the worst president, or like one of the worst presidents ever. It put him lower than.
By historians said that, yeah.
Right, a historian said it. It was absurdist, and that Biden was near the top. But let's say Biden's just was at, or let's use Trump, because they always come up with crazy things about Trump. Let's say Trump really did want to dig the Rio Grande into a moat and fill it with alligators and snakes and put snipers in watchtowers and have them shoot migrants in the legs so that they'd fall into the moat and get eaten by alligators. That was a real thing that was claimed at one point.
Oh, by like a legitimate source. Oh, okay.
A White House insider claimed that. Yeah.
I love those insiders. But they're fan fiction for the TDS set.
And the other day, there was another one that came out from another insider about him meeting, in going to a trip to Japan in like 1990.
Yeah, I saw that today.
Yeah, and saying like, I won't eat any raw fish, and then asking for a cheeseburger, and then to meet the prime minister. And when they said they get back to him in 7 months, he just left or something.
Yeah, the emperor. Like, I want to see the emperor. Right. Like, well, we will maybe see you in a year. Well, I'm out of here. This is not for me.
I mean. The thing that's funny is that when they write stuff like that, they make him sound cool to me. Like it just
it does. Like you're reading like an Americanized Plutarch, like Lives of the Roman Emperors kind of thing.
Right. But I think that the reason that they write that kind of fan fiction, oh no, I got off track because I was thinking about the alligators and snakes. Sorry, what was it?
You were talking about like the most corrupt president. So in opposed to monarchy, democracy. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So let's say all that's true. And not only that, but Trump also, he caused an insurrection. He tried to overthrow the American government. Let's say all of that's true. Well, what's the worst that can happen to Trump? You're going to put him in jail. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. But so let's presume all of this is true. What's the worst that happens to a monarch who destroys the country? Off with a hat. Okay. Yeah. Like there's a significantly, and not only that, but there's a familial and hereditary element to the monarch. Do you want your children to also potentially be killed? See the Romanovs? Because that's what's on the table, is that if you really destroy the country, and you have also no reason to destroy the country because the country is your property and the people are your wards. So unless you really are truly deranged, and it has happened, obviously, you would want to leave the country in a better state than you came into the throne under for your children, because everyone wants to leave better things for their children, again, unless they're insane.
Yeah.
So a democratically elected representative, on the other hand, can just basically, I mean, again, what's the worst that happens? They spend a couple years in jail, but what happens in 99% of cases of fraud or misconduct from democratically elected politicians? They just walk away. They resign. Bye.
Yeah.
Which system sounds more inherently able to be corrupted? And that's one of the major arguments of Lenin.
Well, one of the pushbacks to that, to a fair-minded centrist, not leftist, not rightist, so-called liberal, classical liberal person, is the threat to their freedom, the threat to their liberty, the assumption that people aren't capable and shouldn't make choices for themselves. And with regard, so they go from the political, like if I can't make decisions about political policy issues, then whoever's making those decisions for me would just as easily start making social decisions for me, telling me who I can and cannot associate with, what I can and cannot ingest, what I can and cannot believe. Like, I should have the ability, and everybody should have the ability to develop and make bad choices or good choices according to what they want. And so just the idea of monarchy on a political level is transposed into the idea of a theocracy on a personal level, right? Where we are going to be controlled and regulated by a centralized authority who cannot know my own truth or my own what to do with my life, how to live my life.
There's a couple elements to that.
Okay.
First of all, so you said who I can and cannot associate with. Well, if parents say that they don't want their kids to go to school where they have drag queen story hour and be taught transgender ideology, those kids are not being taken away from their parents. So that's under democracy. In terms of whether or not what people can or cannot consume, where people are not forced, basically, at the prospect of losing their jobs, to take a vaccine under a democracy. So all of the things that you mentioned there are things that can and recently have happened under democracy.
How is that democracy's fault? How is that?
I'm not saying it is. I'm just pointing out.
All right, good.
That this is not necessarily those kinds of abuses of power.
It can happen in any system. Yeah.
The monarchistic system, and why I think it's preferable. Now, sure, I guess that could happen, but a king is motivated because, again, the land is his property, the people are his wards, to not make, and can make bad decisions, but to not intentionally make bad decisions that would intentionally harm the populace. Also, traditionally in monarchies, yes, you have a king, he's going to ask for taxes in order to run the country. But for the most part, things were handled on a very local level. You had a local lord that you would have replied to or that you could have appealed to.
Technology exists where it makes it possible for people to get their fingers in all kinds of stuff. Like to go back in time is to also say that it was just a different landscape of control.
Sure, but if we're talking about everything that we consider to be sort of liberal values were developed under a monarchy. So there's nothing about liberal values, if you want to call them that are antithetical to monarchy. I mean, the Magna Carta, for example, that was about coming to a better conclusion there of trying to figure that stuff out.
Okay.
But if you read also the Federalist Papers and a lot of the writings of the Founding Fathers, most of them actually were really up in the air on the idea of a president. Jefferson in particular, and Hamilton, actually kind of thought that they wanted to just make George Washington king. Mm-hmm. That the problem was not with monarchy as a system of governance, but that the problem was a 3-month gap between the monarch being able to respond or help or do anything, and the Americans on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
So I think even when the Founding Fathers are having a hard time justifying and knowing, and if you also again read these papers, these documents, they predict very much of what I was talking about. Is that people are going to fall into voting blocks. They're going to vote for the guy they like, not based on anything more than because they like the guy for some reason or another, or because they're they associate with him via social identity. I think that the why democracy is more dangerous is that it causes people inherently to see half of the population in a two-party system, for example, as their enemy. That's not the case under monarchy.
Well, not only that, I would also add that it tends to politicize everything more and more and more. It's just like the taxes. If you look at the feudal times, taxes were much lesser than they are now. Like government's currently like taking half of our paycheck and then like dispensing of it through all these like government jobs and stuff like that. Right?
I have those. I can pull up the statistic on it, but it was like 3%.
Yeah, which again is like technology and the way that trade work is completely different back then. But also, like socially, everything in a democracy tends to be politicized. Like a woman's body, let's just say, is a political object, and you have these. I don't know. Maybe hopefully you can give me a counter to this, but you have these activist blocks like feminists or BLM within a democracy because the way that we think about governance is that it's of the people, by the people, for the people. So I need to have not just like a red or blue tribe, but I need to have my identity tribe, and therefore my identity, the personal, is political. And what that does is make every It eventually leads to cultural Marxism because every single thing that's politicized is reduced to the function of power and control rather than love, responsibility, respect, where monarchy would have to be founded on these other values of, like you were saying, like
power. It's still power.
It's still power.
All politics are power, ultimately. The reason why the right fails is because people on the right tend to have Christian ideals that are higher than power. And that's why they lose. Because they think about things like, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, but the left is correct on that one. They just are. Yeah. They know how to play power politics. The right refuses to play it because they have these ideas of, well, no, we need to play fair and we need to make sure that everything, is by the books. And the left just goes, no, we're just going to burn it down because we don't care about anything. There is no truth but power. They will say this slogan and repeat it dogmatically because it's how they feel. I don't think they're just making that up. Yeah. So it's all with the king, the power politics are obvious. The power is in the king. Yeah. So, and by doing so, though,
the power to what, though? I'm sorry. Go on.
To rule.
Go on. Okay. Yeah.
With democracy.
I'm going over it, and I've been getting comments lately that it sounds like I'm an idiot, and I am an idiot. But I always go into these conversations with the tabula rasa. I just want to see the basic things because a lot of our differences come down to just basic perceptions. We need to nail these things down. So. Sure. Power is hermetically sealed in some way in a monarchy if you take the Magna Carta into account. Like there's liberties, the king is defined, power is defined. In a democracy, power is not sealed. Diffused. It's diffused, but it seeps into everything. And power ultimately corrupts the social fabric because there's no separation between so-called church and so-called state or power and life.
The way we often describe it when we talk about it on my podcast is that the difference is that you have, with a democracy, or with the monarch, you have one head of the Hydra. Power is concentrated in this one place where, yes, it could go badly, but at least you can draw back to where the power lies. In a democracy, there's many heads to the Hydra. And if you cut off one, another will just take its place, maybe worse than the last. That's a big issue. And that it inherently allows itself to be corrupted because people who are just interested in power or in money or in, sex or something like this, that they think they can get out of the system, what's stopping them, and they're particularly when they face no punishment, and what's stopping someone worse or just as bad from taking their place and they could be from the other party or another political, group or whatever. It's the same reason why you find that, as you said, the breakdown into these really tiny isolate subgroups. That, I believe, is also part of the leftist paradigm, which I would call Gnostic, is that, and comes out of Hegel directly. So and Dr. Lindsay has talked about this extensively, but the idea is that cultural Marxism, the inherent idea is that the Marxist dialectic is to break down everything under the lens of class. Everything has to be deconstructed under the lens of class to make everyone equal and to level the playing field between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The cultural Marxist paradigm, and then I would say all of that comes out of Hegel and other Gnostic thinkers, which is that it doesn't just stop at, and we see this, it doesn't stop at class. It has to be race, it has to be sex, it has to be gender, it has to be everything. Everything must be broken down and deconstructed so that you can make everything
equitize
equal.
The escalon or something.
Right.
Eschaton.
Well, if you want to get into the metaphysical aspect of the Gnostic stuff, it's so that, once we break everything down, that actually the world was created by an evil god called the demiurge, and then once we break everything down, then we deconstruct the false world that the demiurge has created for us, then we can ascend beyond the pleroma and become one with God or something. Now the leftists don't say that part. Like they're not not most of them, I think.
Well, would you admire them more if they did?
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely. If they were telling me that they were just Gnostics who think that everything needs to be broken down. But ultimately, even though they're not using like that religious Gnostic verbiage, that is what they're saying. It's the progressive march through history. Everything has to be deconstructed. And once you've deconstructed that, everything has to be deconstructed again. It never ends. Yeah. The progressive march never stops.
Yeah.
That's why there's always a new issue every week, every day.
Left me. Like I was bagging on that term, even though a lot of my friends are, and I'm just a stained, in liberalism, and that's how I think, and I am that way. But I still think, well, politically homeless is just like an abdication of responsibility. The left me is an abdication of responsibility. It's like, no, either it was right, either it was this thing or it wasn't this thing. And this thing having left you means that maybe you're leaving it. Maybe it's always going that way. Maybe this progress is just going on to the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. And the difficulty with thinking that way is that you end up making a conspiracy theory, great video, by the way, of the slippery slope tying, let's say, men chemically altering their bodies to breastfeed children. You tie that to gay marriage, and you say, right. Okay, well, and I saw a really great clip of a debate between Senator Barack Obama, I think he was a senator at that time, and then another like counter candidate from the right, a black guy, very, very articulate, and I can't remember his name, and I apologize for that. But the guy was arguing that once we loosen the definition of marriage from once we start to play around with these deconstructive games, then marriage doesn't mean anything anymore. So it wasn't an attack on gay coupling or gay civil unions. It was on the concept of marriage. And you can see that the concept of marriage being attacked is that it was attacked by the same process as the concept of woman is now attacked. It's the same process. So maybe there's an alternative reality where gay civil unions does not lead to men birthing babies, but the path in which both things happen politically is the same path. It's the left me kind of path.
Yeah, it's because the progressive march never stops. It always has to, everything has to be reanalyzed. There always needs to be another issue. There always needs to be a brand new civil rights issue, a brand new social issue, because that's how you motivate. Well, one, that's how you motivate your base, but to constantly be agitized, because the conservatives are just trying to, for the most part, like,
leave me alone,
leave me alone, and just stop.
This was enough.
Yeah, right. And I think that you even at this point, when I've seen recent polls, the vast majority of conservatives are okay with gay marriage, even, or at least gay civil unions. But it does, on some level, make me a little bit annoyed to have to admit that the right was they were right about the gay marriage thing, about it being a slippery slope. Because it's been not in and of itself, but it has been used. The same arguments that were used for gay marriage are now being used for men can breastfeed, and there's no such thing as a woman, and men should be able to beat the crap out of women in sports and all this stuff. Yeah. And I'm not a feminist, but the interesting thing there is watching all these feminists suddenly freak out and be like, wait a minute, maybe we got all this wrong. And I don't think I think they just sided with the wrong horse in terms of they wanted something. They wanted women to be able to vote. What they didn't realize is that the outcome of voting like that is that it does inherently go into that progressive march. People vote as a bloc. They will continue to vote as a bloc, and they will continue to vote for more and more progressive policies, which inevitably, because you have to deconstruct everything, you will end up exactly where we are, where the left does not know what a woman is, even.
Yeah. Thank you for that, bringing up the feminists, because I was wondering what we're talking about deconstructive nature, like the constant politicization, the new issue. It seems this is another contradiction. It seems counter to the Longhouse. We want everything to be. It seems like the ideal world. Maybe I'm wrong. The ideal, if you just think of women as a voting bloc, the ideal would be a fair, peaceful, sedate, stable society, but it doesn't seem to be the outcome of that. If you look at San Francisco, like it's decaying, it's falling apart because nobody's keeping it stable. But like it seems like the tendency would be to want to just nest. If we just take the feminine psychology as given, it would seem like that they would tend towards something more stable than those progressive policies actually lead to. There's a contradiction here. Could you help me with this?
I can give you a conspiracy theory that's based on a lot of very hard data. It's hormonal birth control. It's hormonal birth control. Basically, like half of all women have taken it at some point or another, and a huge amount of women, particularly left-leaning women, take hormonal birth control. Hormonal birth control alters the basic chemistry of a woman's body that locks her in the luteal phase of her menstrual cycle. And when women are stuck in the luteal phase, they are attracted to more feminine-faced men, and they don't tend to pair bond. Or no, excuse me, it's more masculine-faced men that would be bad providers. So they make antithetical decisions to what would be good for them to find a long-term partner. So a woman's inherent empathetic nature gets reversed. She's looking for wrong things that would not be good for her long-term in terms of raising children. It also alters what's called the major histocompatibility complex, which is the closest thing that we've found to human pheromones, where what they'll do is that they will, in scientific studies, they'll put they'll have women smell like a man, right? And she can pretty much instantly tell based on olfactory senses if he is genetically compatible or not, based on genetic drift. Like, so it's like not too genetically similar and not too genetically dissimilar. Women on hormonal birth control cannot detect MCH, major histocompatibility complex similarity. It's just, they can't do it right. So I think that this, by the way, creates a preference for outsiders, for not parts of the in-group. So women inherently have
the loss of the distinction between us and them.
Yes, and it's because,
and even preferring that when you add the progressive agitation, preferring the outsider,
right? Because
the outsider is necessarily more important than you.
So women inherently are more high empathy and more high group oriented. So that's why they one of the reasons why they vote for, it's baby bird. I call it the baby bird complex. And look, I'm prone to it as much as anybody, where you see somebody and, starving children in Africa, I want to help them because you have an empathetic nature. I get that. That does not work in a system of as a voting bloc, to vote for just constantly trying to help other people out, because then it comes with no responsibility, for example, no accountability to those that you're helping. That's not fixing the problem. It's just throwing money at it. Throwing money at something doesn't fix it. I recently did a video about Claudine Gay, and one of the people that she actually tried pretty hard to oust from Harvard is a Black scholar named Dr. Roland Fryer. He still works at Harvard. One of the reasons that he is maligned by academia is that he found, for example, that when you, rather than just throwing money at Black inner city schools, but you had children go to school for a longer amount of time, work in small study groups, and not accept failure. So no, what was the Bushian program of
No Child Left Behind?
No Child Left Behind. Yeah. When you don't accept failure, they did as well as white students at more affluent schools. So that kind of stuff really the left doesn't like it. They don't like that kind of stuff. That it's not, you can't just throw money at a problem, or you can't just express your sympathy and your empathy, and which is what women tend to do in terms of how they vote, more often than men. Men can do it too. There's lots of soy boys out there who think with emotions rather than feeling, or rather than facts, to be fair.
Yeah, but, well, and their fantasies are probably the most sadistic of anybody.
Well, if you know anything about male feminists and their general track record of being weird towards women. But I think that a major issue is hormonal birth control. So many women are on it, particularly left-leaning women. That screws up the whole brain processing of in-group versus out-group distinction, preference for men, and also screws up the empathy system. So I think that's on top of women's inherently more empathetic nature. It's why women tend to vote for things that actually hurt them in the long run, unfortunately.
I wonder, so there is... and I don't know to what extent it's an actual real thing or if it's just an aesthetic trend, but there's this idea of like the trad wife or the aesthetic appeal of, and it's dressed up like it's kind of like it's clickbaity, kind of like really pretty women making baked goods or whatever. But it's
a LARP.
I think, there's the LARP aspect, but I think that if we are going to go forward and any solution is going to absolutely has to speak to women's interests and to men's interests and not just galvanize, but motivate the self-interest of men and women. And
Absolutely.
the gender discourse, fraught as it is still, if it's aimed towards harmonizing the relationship realistically between men and women in large, just from a large point of view, and then allowing the individual variation to also inhabit that gender kind of, not roles, but guide rails that align with the self-interest. If the right is to win, it needs to include and adulate women. Yes. Women's power is not to be underestimated. And maybe it's not voting power, so-called. Maybe it's not external power, but it's gonna be, if it's not that, then it's going to be the old school, like the hand that rocks the cradle, and behind every great man is a great woman kind of power. Sure. So what is the role of women, and how do we hijack their empathy and their vanity in order to empower the right? Let me just put it in the most Machiavellian terms, just for sake of argument.
Sure. The right, such as it is, which is the difference between the right and the left. Well, I say that because the left is more of a unified bloc. They will go along with each other pretty much on anything, as long as that's what other people who, even though one might call themselves this type of socialist or that type of, anarcho-communist or whatever, doesn't matter, or just a Democrat. They tend to align for power purposes because they understand more than the conservatives do, or the right, the importance that all politics is power. The conservatives, that's libertarians, that's rhinos. It's just, and none of them agree on anything for the most part, besides kind of leave me alone. And even then, the rhinos aren't great on that one. So, in order to, one of the things that I've noticed with women recently, and I've been seeing it more and more on like TikTok, is that women are clearly miserable. If we look at the statistics, I've done a video on it. Women are miserable. They report being absolutely miserable. When you look at graphs of women's reported happiness and satisfaction, life satisfaction and happiness are two different things. Happiness is hedonia. That's feeling good. Sometimes having a newborn infant doesn't make you feel very good. Now, does it? If you're being woken up at 3 a.m. to have to go breastfeed, it's probably not a very pleasant feeling. However, the opposite, life satisfaction, that's eudaimonia, meaningfulness, that goes up with things like that. So something might not make you happy physiologically, but make you feel fulfilled. I think that, and we've seen on both measures, happiness and life satisfaction, since the women's rights movement, women are miserable. And then they'll go on TikTok and they'll say things like, why can't I find a man? Why did I spend my whole life getting all these degrees and doing all this stuff? Why all I want to do is stay at home and have a family? And it's okay if you don't want to, but I think a lot of women do. And they've been socially conditioned to believe that that's not correct. I mean, I certainly was to a certain degree as well. It's like, no, you have to go to college. No, I'm a bit of a weird sped, but in terms of, I like intellectual stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of women don't. A lot of women just want to find a guy to take care of them so that they can stay at home and have a family. I think that it's easy. It's not an easy job to raise children and be a housewife, but it's also not the hardest job in the world, which has been bandied about by kind of feminist think tanks and stuff for years.
Yeah, Bill Burr's got a great bit on that. Yeah,
toughest job in the world. Sure, yeah, not laying asphalt. Okay, but very silly there. But I mean, that goes back to it though, about the divesting oneself of responsibility is the female fantasy, I think. Yeah. Oh, it's my hardest job in the world.
That just works against the political project of centralizing. Not centralizing, but cleaning up the mess. If women as a voting bloc don't want responsibility or want the system to take care of the problems, and then they get to express their empathy effectively through altruistic means that
charity which is what was basically happening throughout all of human history up until fairly recently, is that women would take on charitable projects, particularly in their local, with their church or in their town. Yeah. Things that they could use to express their empathy. They weren't these global or national level ideas of voting as a bloc of women for, helping, or even at a city level or something, of what's best for. Again, look at what it's done in places like San Francisco, which are essentially it's just a slum And there's homeless people everywhere because we wouldn't want to pick them up off the street. We wouldn't want to force them to get off drugs because that's not very nice. And it does come down to, it's misplaced empathy. A lot of that, I think, is also because women aren't having children. So they're looking for something to take care of.
Yeah.
I need something to take care of. And I don't have children. I've got my cats, but I don't have anything else. So I need something to take care of. Now, again, as a monarchist, I don't think anybody should vote. But and I've explained my problem with that is because voting, even with republicanism, leads towards mob rule and leads towards mob rule mentality and an us versus them mindset. That's very dangerous. That being said, I'm certainly against 19. If anyone's going to vote, I'll go with the Heinleinian model of service guaranteed citizenship, that kind of stuff. You have to, landowner, be working for and I think women could be able to vote if under that model, if it was you're doing something as a service to your local area, you're serving as like a nurse or something, or not a nurse, but someone who's doing something helpful towards
tying it
Ambulance.
to ownership. Ownership is the theme that I'm sensing here in Monarchy, like all the way down, all the way up.
Yes.
Like the model of it's the family, it's ownership, it's
the whole system is
identity.
hierarchical based on the family system. So let's go bottom up. So, or no, top. Bottom up's easier. So you have a child. Above the child is mother, who's usually closest to the child in terms of actively rearing and engaging in the day-to-day care of the child. And above mother is father, who's the one earning money in a traditional system, right? In a more traditional system. But either way, if he's one earning money and also protecting, if someone breaks into your house, who's going to fight off the intruder? Is it going to be mom or dad? It's going to be dad. So there's a level of hierarchy there. Father is in charge of the household to a certain degree in terms of level of protection. So mother protects child, father protects mother. Above that, you would have, in a monarchical system, a lord, your local fiefdom lord. Now, this person is looking after this local area of land that he makes money from, again, not incentivized to destroy his own land and property by needlessly harming the peasants, right?
Yeah.
So this person is sort of like a father above that. And then above that, you have the king, who is also responsible for the lords, making sure that they don't do anything stupid, that they don't do anything to destroy his property, because ultimately they're just kind of renting it. It's his, all the land is his. And in the traditional monarchy system, who is above the king is God. So we have father, basically. It goes all the way down in terms of responsibility. Because now the king is responsible to the people, but the king is ultimately responsible to God. Because in a traditionally monarchistic system, there is a Christian element to it. Not in all systems, but there's usually that idea that it's the divine right of kings. Because how else do you explain why the king became a king? Now, in a realistic sense, from being usually a warlord who consolidated a bunch of power and then developed a heredity based on control of land. But the explanation for it that works and has worked in order to create the most stable societies in the entirety of human history is the divine right of kings. And that means that even if you can't behead the king, that God's going to do something at some point. I think and because it follows that same familial model of father and child, that it reflects, then the monarchic system reflects the natural state of the human order. And that's why it works.
We're going to get into places that I'm really, really ignorant of, so I don't even know the right question to ask here. Sure. But to what degree, and if you don't really want to venture here, just we can go in a different direction, but to what degree does the economic system of so-called capitalism interfere with this monarchism? It doesn't seem, do they coexist? Is there examples Absolutely. Of highly capitalistic and, well, and by which capitalistic, I mean mercantile corporations, like very strong entities that are doing like big projects, work in conjunction with a monarchy. Yeah.
Let me ask you, what's the richest nation in Europe?
In Europe?
For GDP?
Is it America? Because we basically own you.
Yeah, okay, besides that one. The richest, it is a very small country. They have the highest GDP.
Is it Luxembourg?
Luxembourg's right up there. Guess what
Okay.
Luxembourg is?
A very
Constitutional monarchy.
small, very, very small little place.
It is
like
a
you could probably
constitutional
throw
monarchy.
a stone from one
Yeah,
border to the other, right?
I know a guy from Luxembourg, or used to know a guy from
Is
Luxembourg.
this a limerick?
No, I know. It could have been one. But I used to be good friends with a guy from Luxembourg. Luxembourg, constitutional monarchy.
Okay.
Switzerland, constitutional monarchy. All these really small, very rich nations are all constitutional monarchies.
And very, I'm sorry to go here, ethnically homogenous. Or
Homogenous.
genetically homogenous. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Those very, very wealthy nations, though, are largely constitutional monarchies. Now, myself, I'm an absolute monarchist, which I had to took me some.
Versus a constitutional monarchist.
Yes.
Okay.
The reason why is a little bit more complicated in that the Constitution.
Rule me harder, Daddy.
Right. Well, it's it always, but the constitutionality, like I said, I think inherently it's going to lead to more heads of the Hydra, because when you have more and more elected figures, you have more and more diffused responsibility. An absolute monarch is better at consolidating it. So if the monarch is crazy, again, one head to slice.
Yeah.
But that's now. I've had people respond to that by saying, "Well, then his kids are going to want to take it out on the people." Well, there's still one head to slice, isn't there? Like, I mean, it's at the end of the day, there's still one head there in terms of the successor. So it is never in the monarch's best interest. And these are people raised from birth to know how to govern, because they're taught all their lives how to govern. That's not the case with democratically elected leaders. Look, Trump, I'm a fan of Trump to a certain degree.
What are your thoughts of Barron, like the little fever dream, right-wing fever dream of Augustus Barron?
Yes, I kind of like the meme. I like the meme of Trump just crossing the Rubicon and making himself emperor and naming Reuben his successor. Yeah, I like it as a meme, but it's not realistic. It's just a little joke, I think. But in terms of, I mean, would I like that to happen? I think it might be preferable to the current.
I mean, who would know
system.
better than the embattled Baron? I mean, just imagine yourself like this total naive kid, just stands out and is just watching this complete corrupt system like destroy his father, and his father survive, and his father just somehow keeping through. He's like, okay, yeah. And I don't know, like the perspective of power that a person in that position, if he's smart enough and given the correct education, could be a very formidable either ally or enemy politically.
It depends, but I mean that's the idea, though. That's the basic idea, is that Baron would be. This phrase is not because of its implication, but groomed from childhood into adulthood, into the art of statecraft. Groomed has a very negative connotation these days, for obvious reasons, but in a political sense. And because that's what happened throughout history, is that, you pick a son, oldest son usually, unless there was something weird going on because they were soft in the brain or something. And either way, and train them their whole lives to be like, this is how the system works. This is why you need to protect the system, why you don't, your land, your people, your property. When you look at it from a libertarian perspective, the monarchist system, I think, makes more sense, because it is purely libertarian in terms of the main focus is protecting private property. If the whole country is your private property, why would you destroy it? Why would you do anything to harm your private property? Unless you're insane, because that's always the response I get to that.
It's not just that, but just making bad decisions. Like bad decisions would scale. Like an American king he could, just declare just the project of roads. He's just going to fix all the roads. And you probably have, like in a Yarvanite point of view, you'd probably have a much more efficient hierarchy of accountability, and like we're going to get things done, and just a mobilization. But at the same time, if the king says, well, we want a road there, like he would just kick out anybody on the land. Conceivably, you'd kick out and dispossess anybody who's in the way of his will. Right. There's so many counterbalances things that you would really want a ruler that has good counselors to go through all the permutations of the effects of any given decision.
In Knut Lieden's model, he has provisions in it where his model is something like, let me pull it up. It is something similar to a it's not quite a dogs. It is not quite a constitutional monarchy, although he does include a constitution in it. One moment. One of the things, though, that he says that he wants is a. Sorry if you can hear it shaking outside. We have a really bad windstorm over here the last couple of days. Yeah, so.
Is it like something? Is like the Tempest kind of thing? Things gonna get freaky?
This is where it was written, so
yeah, right.
or around sort of the area. Yeah, so no, it's just it's. I'm sitting next to a the entrance to our attic, so there's a little door here and it shakes. So Kunat Lenin's proposed system is that there's an elected diet of representatives, so that there is representation. I agree with his model. I think it's like the best kind of.
Well, you need information flow. That's we know that from communist versus capitalist systems. You need information.
If the king doesn't also know what the people want to know how to govern, then he's going to be clueless. So I agree with Kunat Lenin's system.
Wait, and I'm sorry, just to slow down. So the people do have will. Their wants are addressed, and the king would trust his subjects.
That's how it works in history.
There'd be mutual trust. Yeah, I want to, because people in this frame of mind, they think of monarchs as tyrants, as Hitler. It's just, they think that it's a Hitler one-way thing. And even Hitler had advisors and stuff like that. Yeah. And maybe I'm disregarding a lot of Hitler's ability to rule because of why and what he did with his rule. But, right, I have to disabuse the people of the notion that monarchy is stupid.
Oh, I think so. The reason why I think so many Americans in particular think that is, one, because our history is, well, told from our perspective, and we kicked King George's butt. So, so we
were liberated.
Won. Yes, we were liberated over. And by the way, what of course was the impetus? What was a horrible thing that King George did? Too much taxes on tea. Now, look, I'm a libertarian also, so I also am not.
Get your hands off my tea.
Exactly. But a little bit, it's not like George was sending out the redcoats to slaughter Americans over, I don't know, kill all the firstborns or something like that.
Yeah.
So in Kunat Lenin's proposed system, it's an elected diet of representatives, a non-elected executive branch of people from, this is the part I have an issue with, by the way, but I'll read it out. Okay. A non-elected executive branch of people from all levels of society who are able to pass competitive examinations and act on a 2-year probationary period before being able to make any decisions. These two branches, the elected diet and the non-elected executive, are supposed to temper what is good with what people want. My problem with the non-elected consecutive branch or executive branch, having to take that competitive test, who determines the test? That's always been my contention with that part of Lenin's system. Mm-hmm. As someone who knows a lot about developing tests for different types to measure different things in psychology, for example,
you would want to do the test.
No, I don't know who should, but
you would want to test the test taker.
I want to test the.
So they should be elected, or at least. Do you truck with experts? Like this expertism?
No, not at all. I despise expertism. Again, as someone who's been in academia my whole adult life.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a good person to ask because you are meritocratically honed by your videos. You're highly intelligent and you take feedback seriously. You take your criticism seriously, and you show your receipts where you can. So you would be an expert, or at least in the running to be an expert, but you still have a problem with expertism. But somebody's got to be the experts, especially in a world with nuclear power or like these infrastructures and stuff and like these medical systems, these behemoths. Like there's got to be an expert class.
Well, my best solution for that would be blind peer review. Let's say we come up with what is the test?
Pressure.
What is the test? So we're going to come up with this competitive test that should be taken in order to determine if someone is able to ascend to this non-elected executive branch because they're an expert, right? Mm-hmm. Then that should be sent out to everybody, like, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scholars and people who are quote unquote experts to be peer reviewed and reviewed and reviewed and meta analyzed to make sure that there's, as best as we possibly can, that it would be a good test and not a test of ideology and not a test of anything else other than competence. But like as we've done with IQ, we're pretty sure that it's measuring something. It's measuring, like, for example, pattern recognition. And that's out of a lot of years of testing. I mean, nearly 100 years of testing and retesting. So I'm just a little skeptical on the competitive test. I think it could be developed, but I'm weary on it. The next one is that the monarch has a crown council that is comprised of his appointed advisors, representatives of the diet, that's the elected representatives, the experts, and the Supreme Court, which I'll get to in a moment. And the crown council will serve as a mediator between the experts and the will of the people, with the monarch having the final say. And then finally, the Supreme Court, which is appointed by another issue of contention, the church and universities, according to Aydin. He's writing this in 1946 or so.
When the church and the universities were both...
Right. Maybe a little bit more respected.
Yeah.
Considered a bit less completely and utterly...
lost.
Taken over.
Yeah.
Right. No, so I don't know. Maybe, again, another giant peer review kind of system.
Yeah.
But hey, that in a way is democracy. You're having a democratic sort of element in there if you do you have experts determine who should be appointed to the Supreme Court. Yeah. But it can be vetoed. Any election to the Supreme Court could be vetoed by a 2/3 majority from the diet. That's, again, the elected representatives. So you have another layer in here where if the will of the people really says we do not want this person on the Supreme Court, if they all agree against the experts, they have a way of stopping it, of stopping that election.
Leverage.
Yeah. Right. This was Leydin's response. And I think he's brilliant. Moldbug cites him all the time, by Curtis Yarvin. He cites Aydin quite thoroughly. I think Moldbug comes to some different conclusions about a lot of the stuff, but I think probably one of his most, not his only one, James Burnham's another one that he cites a lot, but who's worked at the Machiavellians, which is fantastic.
Burnham's great. The Machiavellians. I suggest everybody download the audiobook. Skeptical Waves on YouTube has a nice rendition.
Yes.
What does your society, your ideal society, do with midwits?
Well, what's the problem with midwits in this case? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, in this, the king's got final say on almost all of this. Unless basically the entire society goes against him. Because this, just to finish on the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court examines the compatibility of laws with the Constitution. So this is a constitutional system. The Constitution and morals and ethics. It holds absolute veto. So the Supreme Court can out-veto the king, but it's the only system or element of government that can. And that's it. So with the exception, so that if the Supreme Court totally decides that the king is wrong on some decision, then they can veto a decision from the king. Other than that, the king can kind of veto other issues. But for the most part, a king's not going to be interested. This goes back to sort of some of the stuff that was brought up earlier. Why does the monarch care about what happens in some little town and what they decide to do to, orient their own laws? As long as it's not being completely violative of something that would destroy the country. Like if your town decides we want to make a law where you can't leave apple pies out on a windowsill on Friday. Something, like one of those very silly laws you get in rural areas of America that are from some time past that we have no idea why they're on the books. If it's not causing distress and it's not in any way upsetting the society, the reason why I ascribe to monarchy, in fact, is because I think it maximizes liberty, because it allows people to, for the most part, do whatever they want. You're not going to be held onto such strict, with a democratic system, it's all of these hierarchies all the way down, all of these bureaucracies specifically that have to run and everything to, and such a tight degree and obsessive degree. And however, I don't think that wouldn't necessarily be the case under a monarch, and it wasn't historically. People could make their own rules in their own towns.
What about the problem of ethnicity? Can a multi-ethnic, maybe multiracial, I don't even know if that's the right term, society Just like you were saying about like a properly functioning woman will be able to smell the correct amount of genetic drift, not too close, not too far. I wonder if you can select a king that is too far away from you genetically. I wonder if there is a obedience level that's genetic, or that's ethnic. And if you have too many ethnicities, if obedience to the ownership and the rule of one is possible when there's so many different cultures. I'm wondering that because there is a question that keeps on popping up in right-wing discourse about ethnocentrism, ethno-nationalism, and different sorts of tensions between the different ethnicities.
I've not thought about that. I think like most governments, most forms of government, it probably works best in a society that is largely of the same ethnic
relatively homogenous ethnic.
Relatively homogenous, just because it's easier for people to get along if you look like me. And this is not, it's not even like actively racist or whatever. We know that infants react more quickly to the face of someone of the same race as their mother, or whoever is acting as their mother, because even when they've done this with adopted parents as well, whoever is acting as mom, the baby will react more quickly to their face, to the face of another person of the same racial group who looks more similar to mom than someone who looks very different. That's, if you're going to call babies racist for that, I mean, I think that's a little bit silly, but it's just because we have more positive reactions to people who look more like our mother, essentially.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's racist. I think that's evolutionary psychology. And you can't, one of the things that I think the left really struggles with is that they don't like evolutionary psychology and they want to rewrite it, but that's not possible. Like, I mean, 40,000 years, maybe you could do it, but
why would they have a problem with that?
Because it implies that the baby is racist. There's even books about why that specific thing is racist, that babies react more quickly to the face of someone of their same race or the race of their mother than another race.
Why would racism be bad then? I mean, why would the so-called left have a problem with so-called racism? Why is that a moral failure?
Yeah, it's that Hegelian thing again. It's that cultural Marxism of everything has to be equal. You cannot, well,
it's pure
everything
spirit.
has to be deconstructed. How do we deconstruct it, by the way? By putting up the oppressed groups, tearing down the bourgeoisie and raising up the proletariat to make them equal. But while we're doing it, there's going to be an inequality, and that's on purpose, so that we can eventually equalize them so that there is no difference between groups. And that would be the way that they do it with race, is that the baby's not reacting faster to the face of a person, not of let's say it's a white baby and they have a white mother. The baby's not reacting as expediently to the race of a black woman as it is to a white woman. That's racist. Racist baby. They wrote a book. There is a book, Anti-Racist Baby, and I think that was part of its contention. If you have to decolonize your baby's.
That Kendi is like a thought leader of our time is such an indictment of our time.
I know. Well, but that's it. That's about breaking it down. The fact that like a basic evolutionary psychological force that baby reacts faster to someone who looks more like mom than someone who looks very different, right? You can't untrain that. Again, 40,000 years, but not anytime soon.
We're kind of, the conversation's drifting again, and I wanted to bring this up to you. No, it's my doing, but it's my good because I like to drift. And you're a wonderful person to be adrift with.
Oh, thank you.
There is this book that came out, and then there was this really interesting interview clip that surfaced on Twitter yesterday. The book is called White Rural Rage, and it's written by two people who happen to be Jewish, these two Jewish males, and they went on to this program. I think it was Morning Joe, which is a regime prop. Oh. You actually showed a very telling clip in that conspiracy video. Was it not your conspiracy video where they said that these people are trying to tell people what to think, and that's our job. It's our job to tell people what to think. So it's by admission.
I mean, I think that was a Freudian slip, but still.
Yeah. By Freudian admission, they are the thought leaders. They are the ones who are advancing this idea. And the writers of this White Rural Rage book get up there and do this tirade about the white rural demographic being the most xenophobic, the most violent, the most dangerous threat to democracy. And, right, which is always kind of weird, but there was so much hate towards this group, the deplorables group. And the host was able to say, well, you said a lot of negative things. Let's unpack that. And she got to play like, well, let's slow down there, bucko. But the fact that they brought up these people to slander this demographic so egregiously, it's like, how and then you have the commenters on Twitter bringing up the Jewish question, like, why is this, why do they want us to play this game so much? Why are we being sucked into this ethnic contention? It's so dangerous. I'm wondering what your thoughts on that, how to avoid that. James Lindsay, Dr. Lindsay's very, very adamantly against Christian nationalism, white nationalism. Yes. And he's trying to pave that liberal way forward. On the same hand, the DR, the dissident right, has a lot of reality with it about the ethnocentrism that is just baked into human beings, and to ignore that is the same thing as to go the feminist route where sex ends at the neck, right? Like, to what degree do we be realistic? To what degree can we expect and to engender harmony, not necessarily equality, but harmony in the races when we're playing with this things? I'm bringing up a lot of things because I'm really worried about this stuff.
I am too. I have. I really deeply respect Dr. Lindsay, but he does this sometimes. He's on Twitter all the time. He kind of sniped at me a little bit because I just said something that I think that one of the things that I believe is probably necessary to have, if you're going to have a multi-racial, multicultural American melting pot, it has to be Christian. Because there has to be something or some kind of unifying identity.
There has to be universalizing identity.
Morals.
That transcends.
Universal morals.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Morals. So yeah, okay.
There has to be some sort of universal moralistic system that everyone can understand and abide by. I'm not like, and I get why Dr. Lindsay finds that problematic, if you want to use the term. Is worried about, is thinking about the satanic panic and the theocracies and stuff, which I understand. However, the founding fathers were all Christian. Separation of church and state, I'm still on board with, but we're talking about. I hear
somebody screaming in the comments that they were deists.
Right, sure, but I think that, and I think the Christian moral system, for the most part, is a pretty good moral system to go by, in terms of, love thy neighbor. It has a lot of libertarian aspects to it, but if everyone believes that they live under the same God, I think that's easier to try and get people to get along with, particularly if we're talking about a multi-ethnic, because you can't put the genie back in the bottle in that for America, right? Like, that's not undoing it. Are you going to do the Lincoln program and send the blacks back to Africa? Because that's what he proposed. That's not happening, right?
Libya is what resulted
Liberia,
from that.
Liberia, yeah. But which is not in a great state. So that's all. I mean, that's absurdist. So unless you want to divide the United States into a bunch of ethnic enclaves or something, or racial enclaves, which I also don't think is happening, then the better way, I think, to try and ameliorate the problems and differences between people is to try and find a unified moral good. And in my opinion, Christianity is a pretty good way of doing that. And up until very recently, African Americans, for example, were like the most Christian group in the United States. I think they might still actually be by a margin or so. Mm-hmm. And I think there was more racial, I'm talking about like the 90s and the 80s. It was where we had like that peak kind of racial, we're all getting along kind of stuff. There was still a religiosity there, and still a Christian religiosity largely. That's almost all gone, I would say, in the modern culture.
Yeah.
That would be my solution.
Well, yeah, okay. So you say putting the genie back in the bottle with regard to race mixing, and that's a loaded term.
I don't mind.
Like a lot of people, I don't know who's listening to it. That's why I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of like people. You can't like just separate people. Mm-hmm. Is secularism necessarily another genie that you can't get back in the bottle? Because
maybe
just like
not.
the liberal can't understand the monarchist,
Yeah.
I don't see I don't see the secularist understanding the reemergence
Well,
of religiosity as anything other than a threat to their freedom of thought.
unfortunately, they're all religious. They're all religious. They follow a secular religion. They follow liberalism is their god. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but the way that I see people, even on like the more center side, react to any kind of critique of classical liberalism or any kind of liberalism or leftism, is they act like I've attacked their god just by critique. Well, when you erase God, then I think it is seemingly to me. So let's look at all of human cultures. Is there any culture that we have identified anthropologically that doesn't have some spiritual belief? I don't think so. If there is one, I'm not aware of it. Does it have some sort of belief in the ethereal? I don't think that exists. And the reason why it exists is from also evolutionary psychological purposes, to make sense of the universe. And also as a sort of understanding of the passing of time and history, that horrible things that happen, they must have a reason for it, or it helps to just explain the inexplicable, because we're just apes at the end of the day to some degree. We can't understand we can't fathom things outside of really our perspective. So every culture has some religion, or has had one at one point in time. That means it's inherent. Look at the Joseph Campbell's work on this, of course, about the God with 1,000 faces. And he went through and looked at that every culture has a God. It might not look the same as your God, but every culture does. Yeah. So why would every culture on Earth evolutionarily have developed an idea of a deity? It's because it's evolutionary. It has to be. That's how I come at everything. It's like if every single group on Earth is doing something, there's a reason why, and it's evolution.
But the necessary condition, and please correct me, because I know I'm venturing into territory where I'm going to be incorrect by saying this, but the necessary condition of faith in the Christian God is that it's it happens from the inside out. It can't be imposed. You can't impose that on anybody. So you have to have a liberal wiggle room for people to not believe or to believe in the God on the spiritual level, but on a social level, in order for cohesion to adhere, people need to at least give lip service to it. And if they're giving lip service to this woke ideology, which we know is dilatory and destructive, why not just have them give lip service to the Christian? Why not just say, just say Christ is king? I'd be much rather the people in power saying that than what they're saying currently with,
Sure. But yes, I think that what it comes down to, you could pick any religion then, as long as it's not like insanely prima facie harmful. Could be pick anyone, right? Like not like some religion that's just like, go immolate yourself or something.
Well, that's happening too. I mean, come on, they're sacrificing babies and burning themselves alive.
Oh my God. Yep. Yeah. But the point is about the social cohesion aspect, and the other part that Christianity used to get right. And this is, I think, where you actually doesn't have to be Christianity. It's about morals. And a big part of that is shaming. We need to bring back bullying, and we need to bring back shaming, because I think the reason that this stuff goes so crazy is because there is no concept of shame anymore at all. At all. Yeah. If you can say, no, you can't go and take that child away from their parents and mutilate their genitals. And if you say that you want to, then we're going to make fun of you, and we're going to socially shame you. We're going to ostracise you. Yeah. And that's what the left does, and that's why they win, by the way.
Yeah, and that's why they win. Yeah. I was thinking this is so many parents are divesting from public education in America, and we know that kids these days that haven't been bullied are the most tyrannical generation, most short-sighted and thin-skinned and tyrannical at the same time, demanding safe spaces and taking hostages to get them. There's a niche here for trauma-informed, psychologically adept bullying, where you can go around and hire me to come and bully your kid. I think I would get paid. I would have some sort of moral, pleasure out of that. Some eudaimonia. And, eudaimonia for me, eudaimonia for the kids, right?
Yeah. I think that, look, I was bullied horribly in ways that I do not think were helpful because...
Yeah, exactly. So when you say bring back bullying, like there's
levels.
There's something that you're saying, but you're not saying what people automatically think that you're saying.
I don't want children to be traumatized. It's not what I'm saying. When bullying, I'm more talking about adults bullying other adults into being like, hey man,
social
that's
pressure,
weird.
Scarlet
social
letters.
Pressure. Yes, yes, man. Maybe not. We don't have to go full scarlet letter, but I mean, if you're out there on the streets wearing what was the rainbow monkey dildo? Do you remember that thing?
Yeah,
like
that
if you're
was
out there doing that.
Yeah, that was in a library.
Yes, it was in a library in front of children where it was a rainbow monkey wearing a dildo costume. Yet, no, you need to be shamed. You need to be shamed for that. You shouldn't be celebrated for that. You need to be shamed. And I'm just, I think I do think shame is a good way forward on stuff like that. I'm not talking about, when I say bullying, I'm not talking about horrifically bullying children. I was horrifically bullied, so I'm not.
Is that how you came to Christ? Because that's my question. Let's wrap it up soon because I'm interested.
Yeah.
Because are you a Christian?
Yes.
You Catholic?
So
you're working through.
I'm working through it.
You can tell me your denomination, but I'm wondering if you want to share like your come to Jesus moment. Like what the process is. And because especially intelligent people have problems, I think maybe intelligent secularists can box themselves off from faith because it requires a certain amount of humility that some people's minds cannot stomach, to kind of twist a phrase. So it's interesting to hear somebody of your caliber of mentation, to hear your path towards faith.
Well, okay. I feel like the prettiest girl at the prom, right, is that I have two choices that I'm deciding between, which is Catholicism and Orthodoxy. Catholicism, looking a bit cucked. So I'm aiming more towards Orthodoxy. Yes, sure, because the
least west, the best, it seems like. Yeah.
So Orthodoxy seems to be a little bit better, and I agree with a lot of the Orthodox beliefs. I like listening to Orthodox sermons.
What is it? What is the poetic or aesthetic response you gained?
The tradition. The tradition and the, speaking of the academic stuff, is that I'm very much into the idea of ritual. I think it's very important actually for humans to have rituals because it's how we pass on ideas and values generationally. Mm-hmm. So one of the reasons one of my favorite movies is since we were talking about movies earlier too, it comes full circle, is Beautiful Mind with
Russell Crowe.
Starring Russell Crowe.
My favorite movie of his is Master and Commander. Just saw that again.
Master and Commander.
I love that so much.
But it's Beautiful Mind. It's a biopic about Dr. John Nash, who was born a couple hollers over from me, where I grew up in West Virginia.
Oh yeah, okay. So you guys grew up in the same water table. So you get the same,
more or less. Same schizophrenia. No, disruptors. But Dr. Nash was a brilliant scientist, a mathematician. He was a professor at Harvard. He developed game theory, and he had severe schizophrenia, which caused him to just implode. He is, however, a Fields Medal scholar. And one of the things about that movie that always has hit me, and this is about the ritual aspect, to go back to it. So at the end of the film, when you have become professor emeritus, which is the highest thing that you can achieve in academia, that's when you don't have to really work anymore. Like you are, what that means, emeritus, is that you are a professor after death at this university forever. You are a professor at this university.
Yeah.
Like that's in perpetuity for all eternity. You're a professor here. And when the ritual there is that this guy's been maligned because he's got severe schizophrenia. They had to walk up and ask him, like, Dr. Nash, you seen anything today? Did you see anything weird? Like, or you doing okay?
Yeah.
It was very bad. I mean, it had really severe schizophrenia. And when you achieve professor emeritus, at least classically, I don't know if they still do this, but why I always wish I'd finished it because I want the ritual, right? Is that all the other professors come up to you and leave you their pens on the table, to show deference. I like rituals like that. That's that kind of stuff that I like, and I think that ritual was a part of which would be more part of society. And that goes in, that's why I like the Orthodox Church, because it's part of the ritual. And it's why I also like Catholicism, is the ritual aspect of it.
Well, the woke, if they get their
the signs
way,
of the cross,
there's going to be a day. There's going to be a trans day every day. They're recreating the Catholic calendar just out of marginalized groups.
I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, true. But it's I think ritual is very powerful for people, and that's actually why the left again is winning, because they're creating rituals of we have to have we have to go out and do these protests and do it in this way.
Flag. We're going to do these protests. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's ritualistic.
Say the words.
Yes, you have to. Yes. Black Lives Matter. Trans Lives Matter. Say it is repeating dogma. Literally, it works exactly the way that a religion does in every way. It's ritualistic. And that gets stuck in people's heads.
And so the pattern is attractive to you, and the pattern connected to patterns for ages past.
And how I got into it was, or how I became a Christian, or came, because I went to Catholic school as a kid, and I went to Catholic university for my undergrad, but I was an atheist at the time, or what I called myself one.
Of course, any self-respecting Catholic's an atheist when they're a teenager.
Right. Or in the early 20s. But my family was not Catholic. They were Lutherans, or Disciples of Christ on either side. But the way it came back to it is that when I got a little older, I did feel like there was something missing. I wanted a ritual. So I got into this cringe Norse pagan LARPing stuff.
I think I remember this from our first conversation. Yeah.
So I got real into that. Because
you were attracted to death metal guys.
No, it wasn't even that.
Was it a pheromone thing?
No,
I want a Viking to take me.
It was just, I just thought it was cool. I thought it was fascinating. I was reading all the Eddas and stuff, and I just thought it was really interesting. And I thought it was fascinating. And I liked the ritual. I liked, you have to do the blot, and you have to do, these are the things, you have to do these things to pray to Odin or to Freya or whomever. So it was really neat. And I guess I was just being a little edgy and being like, fuck Christianity, I'll be a pagan, which tons of young people do. And then that kind of dissipated for a while. Then I almost died in 2020 or 2021. 2021, yeah. I got, was it 2020, Bill? Right, in 2020. I had lost so much weight from not being able to eat that I got down to about 60 pounds. And I had, all I was doing was drinking. I was just drinking alcohol, and I was not eating. To cope with like internet stress, I guess, or something.
This is in 2020, 2021.
Oh yeah, and it was after I got COVID. Right after I got COVID, we got the earliest version of COVID here, like the really early one. Right off, like literally a boat came in from China to the island here, and we got like the first strand of COVID. And then after that, I couldn't eat. I didn't eat for 3 months straight, essentially. Anything besides liquor. That was the only source of calories I had. So I lost a huge amount. I was already thin, and then I got down to about 60 pounds. I had a seizure, went to the hospital. They told Bill, my husband, that I was brain dead and I would never wake up. I had a hole in my brain caused by something called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is, when like you hear old stories from the 1800s of like alcoholics going nuts. That's Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Luckily, the hole was in some area of gray matter that didn't really wasn't important.
It's your leftism. Got it. It was the part of your brain that stored your leftism, right?
Well, I mean, I was doing this for long before that happened. Yeah. But it was when you have a near-death experience like that.
Yeah.
I think, it changes your perspective on things, of realizing how incredibly delicate life is, and how. And it was like, I think I need to find some greater meaning. And so I found a lot of comfort in the church and in Jesus. And so that's actually how I became a Christian and dropped the cringe Norse pagan LARPing. No offense to Norse pagans, but I think I was being cringe about it probably. So that's that story.
What's your year looking like content-wise? What's coming out for you?
Okay, the video about false rape accusations, that's taken a really long time to work on, because that's very difficult to work on. It's just hard.
Morally? Morally. Emotionally, I guess?
Emotionally, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't say the word
everybody's
rape.
Getting fucked in this conversation.
Right. The videos, there's almost no way it's getting monetized. So I'm working on all this for
prospect. Yeah.
Well, I'm working on it for to have the truth out there, because the truth matters more than lies to me. That's what I care about predominantly, is trying to come to some semblance of truth on questions. And so I don't like, and what I despise more than anything else is bad maths. I don't like bad maths, and I really don't like people who lie about mathematics. It really irritates me. So when I see a whole bunch of studies repeating,
lying with math or lying about math, which is more
lying with math, lying about math that you've conducted, or playing little games. That's the worst one for me. I can't stand that one, and that's what I found in some of this research was, oh, I see what you did there. And the thing is that these scholars, they know that nobody but other scholars know how to read it. And that if they get challenged on it, they'll just challenge back and say, well, you have a political... It's happened. It happened in... there was a big discussion back and forth between some scholars about the prevalence about whether or not games cause violence, right? Violent video games produced a violent reaction. And when one group of scholars say yes, another group of scholars reply and they say, actually, we reviewed your data and it's a whole bunch of file drawer stuff that was never published. That's a malarkey, to use a Bidenism. And then the first group responded back of, you're just a bunch of loser gamers, essentially. No, they said it in an academic way, but you're just a bunch of loser gamers who can't be objective. It's like, yeah, okay, except for the second meta-analysis that they conducted, the people, going back against it, was actually robust and used outside data that wasn't, well, we can't show you the data because it's in our file drawer, it's not been published. Oh, please. Like, don't play games with me like that. But it takes... I know people are getting very afraid about AI, that they're worried that AI is going to take over everybody's job.
Yeah, and it's going to turn everybody black. Well, at least everybody in history. Which is fine, but it's just not accurate. At least still, and according to my history, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Gemini's right.
Maybe. But I think the best value that I have in terms of making YouTube videos is that I know how to read this stuff, and I can read through the lines on what academics are saying and what they're saying, right? And what they're doing. That ChatGPT can't do that yet. Probably soon, but not yet. It can't figure out like, no. I see what you did there, and I know the study that you're citing, and you studied it wrong. So it's going to be going through some of the most commonly cited
studies. Do you have a peer
studies.
review process before you publish, or do you do it all yourself?
All the research is mine. Or in terms of everything that I write, everything that I collect. So I guess
like publishing it is a form of peer review because then you get feedback from your audience or whoever picks it up.
I would say. It's out there. Is that, well, all the studies I cite are peer reviewed in and of themselves, and I'm doing what I would call a literature review. So, and if you don't believe me, you can peer review me and say that, well, you can go read the study and figure out if I'm lying. I'm not. I just, and that's why I put the graphs on the screen. So it's like, hey, if you don't believe me, here it is. Like, there it is. Like, I'm not making this up. Or
I can't remember. You did receive some pushback just last year, and I can't remember what it was about. But you
attack helicopter study. Was that it? The attack helicopter study.
That's the best way to deal with communists? Is that the question that the study was answering?
There's a study that was published out of Oregon State that was called White Supremacy and Attack Helicopters.
Oh, the conspiracy theory. Like the Chloes. No.
This was you can't find this video on YouTube because it's been removed. And I can't re-upload it no matter how many times I've tried to fight it.
Can we talk about it or should we not talk about it?
No, I can talk about it. It's fine.
Okay.
The gist of it is there was a study that was published by some scholars out of Oregon State called Attack Helicopters and White Supremacy, or the other way around. And it was...
White supremacy's got its hands in so many things. It's such an efficient ideology.
It was just an abysmal study where they offered students or participants, I think it was like a $5 or a $10 Amazon gift card to answer their survey about the experiences of non-binary and transgender people in academia at Oregon State. And then, so here's how you don't conduct research. Is you say at the very first step, are you transgender or gender non-binary? And then you say, no, as does 99.98% of the population, or 99.8%. And then it says, no, you're not eligible. Bye. Now you put that at the end, or you don't tell them at all. And then you say, we're entering you into a raffle where you could win the gift card, the Amazon gift card.
Yeah, okay.
So what happened was,
they incentivized certain answers.
No, but they incentivized everyone to say, yes, I am transgender and gender non-binary.
Yeah. And
then so when people got kicked from the study, they just reloaded the page and said, yes, I am. And now you've created some psychological reactants. They're mad now that you told them they couldn't get the gift card because they're not part of this group. Again, the normal way of going about this research would be to just say, we're going to enter you into a raffle, or wait until they've completed the study to ask that final question before you kick them out of the data that you're collecting. So they got a bunch of answers of people saying like, yes, I identify as an Apache attack helicopter. And because they're mad now. They're really angry because you kicked them out of the research. It's very obvious what happened.
Their free
Amazon gift card. Yes, I want my $5 Amazon gift card, please. Like, and they're a bunch of college students, so they're broke. I get it. I think it was $5, but still $5 is $5.
Yeah.
And then they went and cried. The paper was just so like pathetic, just crying about how two of the authors had to take time off of work. They had to take a sabbatical because they were so upset by reading the responses of people trolling them.
Yeah.
And I just read the paper. I read through it. I went through the methods. I went through the responses, which were hilarious. And I looked at the curriculum vitae of the authors. This is a published piece of research. It's all public. That video was struck down for a privacy complaint because one of the authors, who was a graduate student at the time, or PhD student, excuse me, did not want their name to be public, even though I didn't use their dead name or anything. I used their transgender name. I was very clear. The University of Oregon put out a video about this person, like highlighting them as student of the year. I'm not joking. Mm-hmm. And then the University of Oregon deleted that video after mine went up, and I exposed their paper as being shitty. I exposed your paper as being shitty. I went through all the mathematics and methods about why it was crappy. And then they didn't like it. All of a sudden, they won't retract the paper. That's interesting. They won't retract the paper, but they forced me to retract. The video can't go back up. Yeah, I was really angry about that for a while because, and I kept contacting the University of Oregon. I contacted the provost. I went all the way up to the provost. I went from every single level at University of Oregon for months, actually, trying to get them to listen to me. And they wouldn't. They just said, nope, we don't care. Because they want to hide it. Because that's hiding. You want to cover up your mistake. You've made a huge mistake. You've made a giant mess. But that's the state of academia. That they can't be honest. So they publish horrible things like attack helicopters and white supremacy. And then try to get any evidence of it. Again, type it into Google. You can find the study. You can find it with all of their names right on it. Very proudly displayed under the title. All of the names of the scholars involved. But they had to delete my video. That was the issue I had last year,
Yeah.
Curious, though.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of faith in academia.
No, well, after really that Claudine Gay thing either.
Burn it to the ground, I think, is the only way to do it.
Or and I covered the Eric Stewart case where that guy was considered a acclaimed black scholar, had plagiarized all his work. Or just plagiarized, just straight up stolen it. He just stole it from other people.
Isn't that interesting? The ones that get ahead are plagiarists, and the ones that don't get ahead are telling the truth.
Yep, exactly.
And I guess the skin color matters for the people who are liars, but the people who tell the truth, the skin color actually doubly matters because a black person,
like Roland Fryer, Dr. Fryer, he was pilloried. He had to hire private security paid for by the university, by Harvard, because they were threatening to kill him because he found that cops didn't shoot. Now they engaged in more violent behaviors, more aggression, but not more shootings against black people than the white suspects.
Isn't
and they
that
wanted to kill him for that.
Such a novel coincidence that very issue was the accelerant for a massive color revolution. Well, people of color revolution.
Sure.
Isn't it interesting that that's the one? That's the thing. Like the cops shooting unarmed black men is the one that like the regime seems to have been. If you look at it, you know, like inculcating in the young generation to have a trigger. For
sure, it's it was their Vietnam, wasn't it? Or their protest of there's this great injustice that's happening.
Yeah,
we have
to watch.
We as the young people, we have to go out and fight and use and have our voices be heard to stop innocent black men from being shot. And then again, Dr. Fryer, who's a black man, and this is the other thing that I found in that sort of kerfuffle, not just with Claudine Gay, but also with Eric Stewart. The two plagiarists. Well, Eric Stewart actually wasn't a plagiarist. He just made stuff up. He just totally invented data, which is arguably worse, but they're both pretty bad. The people that they screwed with predominantly were other black scholars. There are two people that Claudine Gay predominantly plagiarized from or mistreated. She was on the panel that tried to get Roland fired, had him suspended for 2 years with no pay from Harvard.
For issuing a paper.
No, their claim was that he had flirted with some girl in his lab. Oh, and he had kind of flirted with her, but I saw all the messages and it was like, I was so light. So, I mean, it wasn't like, I'm going to do, it wasn't crazy stuff. It was
fetching.
Flirting. No, it was light flirtatious stuff. And she'd be like, I'm at a conference getting drunk. Yeah. Yes. Right. It's, but it's because that's the believe all women stuff when it's useful, because again, they understand power politics better than the right does.
Yep. Yeah.
But they suspended him for 2 years. That Claudine Gay was on that panel. The other person is Dr. Carol Swain, who used to be a professor at Vanderbilt. Dr. Carol Swain is also a black woman. You can see her all the time on Steve Bannon's show. She goes on Fox News. She is very adamant that that like there is no such thing as that this idea of systemic racism, such as the way that it's portrayed, is absolutely absurdist. Both Dr. Swain and Dr. Fryer came up from nothing. They came up from abject poverty, worked their way through the academic system, were recognized for the brilliance of their work, and then were able to ascend into this esteemed ivory tower. Yeah. Claudine Gay was born into privilege. Her parents were, her family owns the largest concrete factory in Haiti. She went to one of the most expensive preparatory schools in the U.S. and then immediately goes to Princeton and then to Harvard and then becomes president of Harvard. Is there any more privileged, background than that? Meanwhile, some guy whose mother abandons him, his father's a drug addict, gambler, and has to be raised by his grandmother in abject poverty, ends up becoming the head of a lab at Harvard by his own volition, like Dr. Fryer. We shouldn't respect that. Don't respect that. No. Don't listen to what he has to say. And I don't think that either one, Harold Swain is clearly conservative, but I don't think Dr. Fryer is. I think he's apolitical. I think he just cares about science, which I respect. Because I do care about politics. I have a political belief or political beliefs. But at the end of the day, if it's not backed up by science, I don't really care. Yeah. Or I won't repeat it.
So you have a pending episode that's pending. What else is coming up? Where can people check you out? You're streaming constantly. You're such a streamer.
Oh God. Oh, I hate it. Actually, 30 minutes here.
Yeah.
So, I stream every Tuesday I have a second channel called Broken Crown. You can look it up on YouTube, Broken Crown. I stream there on Tuesdays. We do a Pathfinder game if you like nerdy stuff. It's like Dungeons and Dragons, but Pathfinder is just another kind of Dungeons and Dragons, essentially, another system. Then on Wednesdays, I do a news and politics stream with my co-host Spoon on the same channel. On Thursdays, I do a stream on Geeks and Gamers Tabletop. That's Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. And then, that's about it. Those are the streams I'm on every week, which is a lot, but and then be too late for this now, but I'm always doing something. So I'm all over the place, essentially, which is stressful, but fun too. Not as stressful as Hassan makes it out to be.
Well, I love that you got a camera finally. It's much more pleasant to speak to you face to face or pixel to pixel rather than icon to icon.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I started doing it because everyone kept calling me an AI. I kept getting all these. I kept getting so many comments of being like, "Well, this is because I'm speaking in a radio broadcaster voice when I'm reading rather than speaking extemporaneously."
Yeah.
And so they were like, "Well, Aiden's running all. This is just an AI. I won't watch AI generated content." So now I record like the first like 3 minutes of the video on the camera and just go, "Hey, like I'm clearly a real person. You don't have to be afraid. It's not. I'm not the fucking Terminator, okay? Like I'm not Showdown. It's fine."
Skynet,
That's what
Aiden.
Skynet.